Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video for the channel. Thing is that a while ago, actually a few months ago, actually almost a year ago, I uploaded a video to this channel talking about why I believe Queen is the most overrated band. And honestly, I was really happy with the video because even though my videos don't really have that many views, what I do get sometimes is interactions, comments of people giving their opinion or on my thoughts on, the band. In the video, I repeatedly say that I believe that Queen is one of the best bands of all time, but I don't believe that it's the best of all time as many people, say. But, because of all the great interaction I had in that video, I thought that it would be a good idea to make another video on Queen, this time ranking their entire discography. Now, that's something I do really often on this channel. So if you want to see more videos like this, then go ahead to my channel and click one of the playlists called Ranked. I've done quite a few artists, so you can check it out if you want to. With that being said, guys, remember that this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. I would love to see what your own ranking on this band is. Also, we only have 13 albums to go through. Okay, I'm not counting the soundtrack thing, Flash Gordon, and I'm not counting Made in Heaven as well. We're starting from Queen number 1, the self-titled album, and we're finishing it on Innuendo. So now that that's been said, let's go on with number 13. At number 13, guys, we have The Miracle. For me, honestly, no matter from what perspective I take on this album, it is the worst Queen album ever. The thing is that if we ignore who released this album, this may not be as bad as you think. I don't think that the tracks of this album are that bad, but considering we're talking about Queen here, this album is pretty weak. I'm not gonna get into detail why I don't want to make this video too long, and I don't want I think that the best way that you can see why I think this album is as bad as it is for you to listen to the album by yourself. But if I have to put it in few words, the thing is that, Freddie Mercury tries to outperform the rest of the band in this album, and it doesn't sound good, It's almost like the entire album focuses on Freddie's vocals and instrumentation, it's in the background. It just seems like they stopped trying to do interesting things with the instrumentation just for Freddie to jump in and do a few high notes, and that's it, you have a good song. Still, I Want It All remain one of the best tracks from Queen, and the intro track Party is really nice as well. The rest is just mid. At number 12, we have Hot Space. The reason why I don't like this album is pretty much for the same reasons I don't like the previous album. The thing is that in this album, Queen was trying to change their own sound to a more pop kind of thing. And when they actually commit to this sound, the album sounds quite good, there's nothing wrong with it. But the thing is that the album isn't really focused, because one time you can be listening to an 80s pop tune, and then the other time you have the same rock opera that Queen is known for. So it doesn't really, they don't commit to a certain sound, they don't capitalize on anything, they just make whatever it sounded good at the time, and that's just no way to do an album. Still, you have one of my favorite tracks from Queen in this album, which is Under Pressure, and the album as a whole isn't really that bad, but it just feels so boring. It tries to do so much that it really ends up doing nothing. So yeah, that's the reason why it's number 13. Number 11, we have A Kind of Magic. The reason why I know that for many people this is their worst album, the reason why I like it a bit more is because I feel like A Kind of Magic is way more unoffensive, or at least way simpler than their other attempts to switch to pop music. It's like Queen was doing more laid back stuff at this point, more enjoyable stuff rather than to make a huge deal out of pop music as they try to do in albums like The Miracle and Hot Space. Plus, Freddie's vocals are way more relaxed in this album, or that's the way that I feel it. I feel like Drake, And the track list as well, the title track, A Kind of Magic, is really catchy. You have Who Wants to Live Forever, one of my favorite vocal performances by Freddie, and I don't know, the whole track list just flows better than in the previous albums. But this is still not decent enough for the standards of a band like Queen, so that's the reason why it's number 11. At number 10, you have The Game. The fact is that even though the track list in this album is pretty goddamn strong, is that, they were starting to go into a more pop kind of sound, and they didn't want to let go of that rock opera thing that worked so well from them in the 70s. So in this album, sometimes you're gonna have a song like Another One Bites the Dust, and then you're gonna have a rock and roller that's loud, Freddie Mercury singing his soul out, and maybe that's a good concept for an album where it's done properly. But at times, and I know a lot of people are gonna hate me for this, but I feel like this album sounds like a compilation album. I don't think it sounds focused enough to be considered an album. They just went into the studio and everything that sounded like a hit now goes into the album. And again, I don't think that's a proper way to build an album. Queen, before this album, used to be way more precise on the sound they wanted to do on an album, and to do this kind of thing where you just don't know what you're listening to. Sometimes it's pop, sometimes it's rock, sometimes it's an opera. I don't really like it. At number 9, we have Innuendo. Yes, the final album by Queen, the goodbye from Freddie Mercury. This album, I believe that even though a lot of people say this was not Queen at their peak, which I agree, I believe it's way more focused and organized at building up the track list. Even though the track list isn't half as strong as the previous album, it flows way better. Freddie Mercury's performance is way more mature in a way that he doesn't really need to yell that loud anymore in order to show feeling. You can sing as loud as you want and hit as many notes as you wish, but if you don't have some sort of build-up to this kind of performance, it sounds so numb. In this album, he sounds way more focused on how he wants to sing, and if he doesn't really need to sing that loud, he just doesn't. Like in the track These Are the Days of Our Lives, which is one of the most emotional tracks from Queen, and Freddie's not singing his heart out in the track. And I like that balance, Innuendo, I think it was a good goodbye from Queen. Still not their best album, or even close to be one of their best albums, but it's a nice album. At number 8, we have News of the World. I know that a lot of people think that this album is one of their greatest just because they have two of the best rock and roll anthems of all time. Because I imagine listening to this album for the first time and listening to those first two tracks and thinking, wow, I'm about to listen to the best thing in the world, because that introduction is insane. But the thing is that the introduction only makes the rest of the album feel so bland and so, boring. I have to put this album higher than Innuendo just because of the track list, really. Because it's not that the album isn't organized or doesn't have any other good tracks in it. It's just that the rest of the tracks don't really match the same level of quality as the first two. Again, this album is worth a try. Maybe you'll like many of the songs in here and this is just your favorite album from Queen. But for me, I believe that, the album after that opening, it just becomes incredibly underwhelming. At number 7, we have Jazz. I don't know why that was the title of this album. I don't get it. I don't know if there's some sort of context behind it, but there's nothing jazzy about this album. This is a rock and roll. This is a rock album, actually. It probably has the worst and weirdest opener on any Queen album. The track stuff is just not good. And if you consider the track list, maybe you won't find a lot of Queen's best songs in it, but the thing is that the album flows pretty well, It's one of the most focused albums Queen ever did after A Night at the Opera. Of course, it has Don't Stop Me Now, which is my favorite Queen song, but that isn't really the highlight of this album. There is no highlight on this album. The whole track list just flows well, and that's it. There's nothing else to it. Still, this is not Queen at their peak. This is not one of their best albums. Actually, in terms of quality, I don't think this is even in the top 10 of the year that it was released. But we're talking about a good album, an album that deserves a shot if you're a Queen fan. So yeah, definitely give this album a try. Some of the best songs in here is Fat Button Girls, Jealousy, Dreamer's Ball, Let Me Entertain, and Don't Stop Me Now, obviously my favorite Queen song. At number 6, we have Queen 2, and the reason why Queen 2 falls only at number 6 is because I personally believe that everything that Queen did on this album, they did way better on the previous effort. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great songs in here, some of my favorite songs from them are actually in this album. And again, if you look at the track list, you're not gonna find one of, the many Queen rock anthems that they did in the 70s. But the fact is that you don't really need it. You just have an album that it's focused, it's precise, it tries to stay stay in the same lane of music. And every song is like a continuation of the previous song and an introduction to the next song, which is the way that an album is supposed to sound. But if you want a few songs that you can listen to before you listen to the whole thing, just so you can, have an idea of how the album is going to be, you have White Queen, Nevermore, The Fairy Failures Master, I believe it's called. Sorry if I'm wrong, it's just the track has a really confusing name. One thing that I would like to say though is that this album probably holds the worst Roger Taylor performance ever. The Loser in the End is probably the worst attempt to sound like Rubber Plant from Led Zeppelin ever. Roger Taylor doesn't really do anything good for the track. And the instrumental is nice, but the way that he sings is so annoying that kills the whole track for me. So yeah, that's the only bad thing I have to say about this album. Other than that, this album is really good and one of the best albums of that year. At number 5, we have Sheer Heart Attack. This will be the last time that we will hear Queen as just a pure rock band with nothing else that, a few rock and rollers. And I fucking love it. Even in this album, you'll still find a few hints towards the rock opera thing they wanted to do in the next album. But this is still, heavy rock Queen, progressive rock Queen, with one of my favorite tracks from Freddie Mercury, one of my favorite vocal performances, just the way that he flows through the track. Killer Queen is one of my favorites. In the Lap of the Gods is also an amazing song. Brighton Rock, an amazing album opener. I don't know, there's just not a bad track on this album. And again, this album is really focused. It follows a certain pattern, and it doesn't really make the music repetitive. It just makes the whole album have some sort of sense. Definitely one of my favorite Queen albums, one of the ones that I've listened to the most, to be honest. And the only reason why it falls on number 5 is just because the albums above it are better, not because I think this is a bad album, because this album is great. This album is really good. At number 4, we have Queen, self-titled album, the debut album of Queen. But even though it's the genesis of Queen, it's impressive that on the first album, Freddie Mercury and the rest of the band had the guts to do an album like this, because this is not your conventional rock album from the 70s, This actually strays away from that path to do something more progressive. Progressive rock was already quite a big thing at the time, and this is not one of the best progressive rock albums out there, not from the 70s or from any other decade. But one thing that I can tell you is this is a way more accessible and enjoyable type of progressive rock. I don't know if it's because of Freddie's vocals or if it's the fact that the instrumentation is way simpler than many of the other alternative rock albums at the time. And once again, the track list, you're not going to find the typical great Queen songs in there. The whole album flows in a way that it's great. You have Doing Alright, My Favorite King. I know that these songs are way slower than the rest of the album. They're just so beautiful. Some of the most beautiful compositions Queen has ever done. You have Jesus, The Night Comes Down. It feels so majestic, everything that Freddie wrote at the time, and his vocal performance, the way that it's produced in a way that it doesn't just exclude the rest of the band. It works with it to craft a majestic piece of music. Every single song on this album is well crafted, well timed as well. It's not too long nor too short. It's the right amount of time for an album like this, and I really, really like this album. Now, at number 3, we put The Works, and even though I do believe that the debut album from Queen is way more interesting and way more, calculated, the fact that this album is so enjoyable and so thoughtless and so effortless in a way, they didn't try to make such a majestic thing as they were trying to do in every single year prior to the release of this album. Because with Queen, it almost feels like even when they were just making a pop record or something like that, they were trying to do something so big, like everything they did in the early 70s. So it feels so nice to listen to a bunch of tracks that only see Freddie Mercury doing songs that are just enjoyable to play. As a result, you have probably the most pop-oriented track list of their whole discography, with songs like Radio Gaga. You also have beautiful ballads like It's a Hard Life, one of my favorite from him. I Want to Break Free is also an amazing track, one that everyone knows. Keep Passing the Open Windows, beautiful track. You have Man on the Prowl, which is an amazing song, and also Hammer to Fall. Everyone knows that song from his live presentation in 1985. The track list, even though it's not as interesting and as I don't know, risky as the rest of their discography, is really enjoyable. And for me, it's a relief to listen to, you know, to the band without trying to make everything so fucking complicated. They were just trying to make a set of good songs, and you know, they delivered. This is one of my favorite albums from 1984, so definitely number 3, give it a try, because this is a really underrated album in Queen's discography. At number 2, we have A Day at the Races. I know that a lot of people say that this album is incredibly overrated because it feels like it feels like this album is only a ghost of what A Night at the Opera was. But you know, even though it kind of feels that way for most of the track list, it really doesn't. Maybe the track list isn't as great in terms of quality and in terms of commercial success as A Night at the Opera. But you know, the whole concept is as well displayed in this album as in A Night at the Opera. If you take away songs like Bohemian Rhapsody and Love of My Life and put it in an album like A Day at the Races, that album would have been the greatest Queen album ever. What I'm trying to say is that even though it doesn't have the juggernauts, you know, that A Night at the Opera has, this album still delivers the same kind of feeling of majesticness and carefully crafted compositions that, you know, made A Night at the Opera such a great album. So, you know, I think that even though this album isn't really at the same quality, at the same level of quality as A Night at the Opera, this is still one of their best albums. And in my opinion, the last Queen album that sort of makes them a competitor to one of the best bands of all time. You can have a lot of great albums, you know, like The Works and Jazz, and say, okay, I have more good albums. But the thing is that this was the last time that Queen portrayed such a mastery in terms of songwriting and production. So that's the reason why A Day at the Races is a wonderful album in my opinion. If you want a few tracks from this record for you to see how amazing this album is, Tie Your Mother Down, You Take My Breath Away, Millionaire Waltz, You and I, Somebody to Love, one of the best Queen songs ever, and also Good Old Fashioned Loverboy, a really just cute track, honestly. This album is really underrated. Give this album a shot with an open mind, you know, stop thinking about A Night at the Opera and give this album a shot. This is no surprise to anyone. I'm being a huge cliche putting this album at number 1, but you know, you just don't have an option. This is by far the best Queen album ever. If you want to look at the track list, this album has probably the strongest track list out of their whole catalog. Not only in terms of, you know, how good the tracks are, but also from the commercial success point of view. This album has what for many is the best song of all time with Bohemian Rhapsody. And maybe if you want to be an idiot and say that this album is overrated only because of the movie or whatever, or even worse, some people may believe that this album is overrated only because of the track Bohemian Rhapsody. Let me give you a quick tour on the track list of this album and how amazing it is. Death on Two Legs is the strongest album opener from any Queen album. Blazing on a Sunday Afternoon, what a cute and enjoyable doo-wop song. Also 39, You're My Best Friend, Seaside Rendezvous, one of my favorite Queen songs ever. The Prophet song introduces Love of My Life so well. Then you have Good Company, which is a nice track, but it's a great introduction to Bohemian Rhapsody, which is one of the best songs ever made. That track list alone should be evidence enough that this album is amazing. But not only the track list is important, but also how well the album is produced. It was ahead of their time. You know, the technicalities used to build this album were so futuristic, at least at the time. Even today, how many layers and how many different types of composition this album has is incredible and remarkable. And such an accomplished attempt as well. You know, they didn't miss on any track. There's not such a thing as a bad track on this album. I myself am not a fan of Roger Taylor's singing, but I'm in Love with My Car isn't really a bad song either. It's actually a really good song. It stays on the concept, it's focused, it has an amazing track list, it has an amazing vocal performance, a really versatile vocal performance by Freddie Mercury. Even though I don't agree on the fact that Queen is the best or even in the top 10 best bands of all time, if someone wants to say that and they put this album on my face, I really have nothing to say against it, because this is an amazing piece of music and one of my personal favorite albums. So yes, this album is definitely the best album ever crafted by Queen. That is it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I really hope that you agree with me on this list. I know that some of the picks, especially on the 70s album, may be a bit controversial, but I honestly hope that if you don't agree with me, you can put your own list down below in the comments and I'll make sure to check it out. If you enjoyed the video, guys, go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. If you want me to tackle on another list or another artist that you may recommend, then go ahead and leave it down below in the comments so I'll check it out. With that being said, guys, I really hope I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.